I wasn't expecting much that Saturday. I just stopped by my parents' house in Salem to help my mom with some paperwork she said she couldn't handle on her own. It was something I did pretty often. After years of paying the bills, fixing whatever broke, keeping everything in order, deep down, I still felt like that place was some kind of home. Foolish of me. My mom, Denise, handed me a messy stack of papers and went back out to the garden like she was passing me some random errand. I sat at the kitchen table and started sorting through bills, tax forms, and old receipts until a different envelope landed in my lap. It was thick, cream-colored, with big letters at the top, estate plan and will. I figured, as anyone would, that my name would be in there, especially after all those years of showing up. But what I found was something else. The will spelled it out, plain and clear. Everything, the house, the new car, the furniture, my mom's ring, even the small savings account, everything was going to Emily, my younger sister. I was left out. My name is Michael Reed. I'm 35 years old. I'm a software engineer, been working remotely since before it was trendy, and people have always said I was mature for my age. I never took that as a compliment. I was born in Salem, Oregon, an only child until I was 9. Back then, my dad used to say, somewhere between one beer and the next, that the real dream was to have a girl. My mom would smile awkwardly, but never corrected him. And then, when Emily was born, I got it. They weren't joking. She was the star. Blonde, delicate, loud in that way adults find adorable. Me? I was the kid who already knew how to make his bed, keep his mouth shut, and not ask for anything. I became useful way too early. I remember that Christmas when she got an imported toy kitchen set. I got a plastic tool belt. Because Michael's the practical one, right? My mom said, laughing. What no one noticed was that over time, I just stopped asking for anything because I already knew that what I wanted didn't matter. It felt like I'd been cast in a behind-the-scenes role, the one who holds everything together but never shows up in the final picture. And over time, I started to believe that was exactly where I belonged. A spot where I wouldn't be in the way, where I wouldn't ask for anything, where I just worked. At 16, I got my first job at a computer repair shop. While my classmates were at parties or on sports teams, I was saving up. For college? Nope. It was to pay for repairs on my mom's car. She used to say, "One day I'll pay you back." But it was never about being paid back. It was about keeping things running, because deep down, I thought that was my job. At 19, I was the first in the family to go to college. Did it all myself. Enrollment, student loans, scholarships. I graduated in software engineering with no celebration, no parents in the crowd, no one in the audience. They couldn't come because Emily had the flu. But deep down, I had a feeling it was just another play for attention from someone who was used to getting it all. She always had someone to hold her hand. I always had to figure it out on my own. And I did, in the silence, in the absence, in the weight of knowing that if I didn't handle it, no one else would. And what I didn't know back then was that all of that was just the warm-up. Because when you spend your whole life fixing everything, people learn to break things without thinking twice. The first time I paid my parents' mortgage, it was because of an emergency. My mom called me crying. She almost never cried. She said the bank had made a mistake, the payment didn't go through, and if they didn't fix it by Friday, they'd lose the discount. My dad was too stressed to deal with it, according to her. I was in the middle of an important project, but I dropped everything, transferred the money right then and there. 3 days later, she sent me a pie to say thanks. At the time, I thought it was sweet. 2 weeks later, she called again. This time, it was the electric bill. The next month, the heater, then the car insurance. Before I knew it, I was covering half the household expenses without anyone ever discussing it. It wasn't a request, it was a quiet transition, like it was just natural for me to take over. At first, I rationalized it, thought it was just temporary, that Emily would land a steady job, that my dad would sort out their finances. But none of that happened. She changed jobs every 3 months. He spent most of his days watching news reruns, and my mom kept saying things like, "You've always been the responsible one," and somehow that turned into a reason to expect more from me. Emily was 24 when she quit her 4th job in under a year, said she needed time to reassess her path. Meanwhile, I was paying for our parents' health insurance, covering their bank debts, keeping my own apartment running, and still sending extra money at the end of each month. Money that, by the way, helped cover a car they bought without even telling me. but whose payments had silently become my responsibility. That month, it hit me. I wasn't just paying bills. I was trying to stop a collapsing structure from falling apart. Every call from my mom didn't weigh on me because of the amount. It was the anticipation of the ask, like my peace was being withdrawn in invisible installments. I remember one Sunday afternoon, sitting on the porch, when my dad said, "It's good to know we can count on you, son. You're the rock of this family." In the moment, it felt like recognition. For a few seconds, I was even proud. But that sentence echoed in my head for days, and I realized no one ever asks if a rock is cracking. They just expect it to keep standing. There was a night Emily called me in tears because she didn't know how to file her taxes. I dropped what I was doing, spent 2 hours explaining everything, organizing it all for her. The next day, she posted a selfie at some expensive restaurant captioned, #gratitude vibes. I was the functional son, the one who fixes things, who doesn't complain, who asks for nothing, the emotional extension of the household, but with no seat in the main room. And the more I gave, the more it felt like that was all they expected from me. But what no one there seemed to realize is that even the most stable man has a breaking point. It was just a regular Saturday. I'd stopped by my parents' place to help my mom with her tax documents. She's never liked technology, so she always asked me to scan, sort, and file everything. Just another one of those favors I did on autopilot. We were in the kitchen. She handed me a slightly messy folder, said, "Take a look at this for me, sweetheart," and went back out to the garden to tend to her orchids. I sat down, like I always did, and started sorting the papers, bills, bank statements, medical receipts, until, right in the middle of the stack, I found a thick, cream-colored envelope with big letters, estate plan and will. The moment I picked it up, a dry knot hit my stomach. I didn't know exactly what I expected, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. It felt like a part of me already knew that whatever was in that envelope was going to hurt. I opened it, read it again, and then my fear was confirmed. The date at the top stopped me cold, 2.5 years ago, which meant the decision to leave everything to Emily had been made a long time ago, while I was still covering the mortgage, still paying for health insurance, still plugging every hole in that house. All of it, while already written out of the picture. My mom walked back into the kitchen just as I was still holding the will. She looked at me, then at the paper in my hand. Did you find the bank statement?" I kept my eyes locked. "Is this will the current one?" She hesitated. "Yeah, but it's just a safety thing, so your sister doesn't feel so vulnerable if something happens." Her tone was almost nurturing, like I was being dramatic for even caring. That's when my dad came into the kitchen, mug in hand, wearing that old Seahawks sweatshirt. I turned straight to him, no soft landing. "So it's true? Everything goes to her?" He paused for a second, clearly caught off guard. Tried to cushion it with that casual tone he always used when he wanted to shut down a conversation before it even began. "It just made sense at the time. You're doing well, Michael." "Emily, well, she's still figuring things out." Right then and there, with the will still in my hand, it all clicked. I realized that everything I'd done for them over the years hadn't changed a thing. That my presence, my money, my loyalty, had never been seen as love. They'd been seen as insurance, as convenience, and worse, they'd been taken for granted. For the first time, I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't try to steer things back on track. I just accepted it because that's exactly what they believed. The plan was to give everything to Emily and leave me with the invisible job of keeping everything afloat. And right there, in the cold logic of those justifications, something inside me turned to stone. I didn't say another word, because I knew whatever came next was only a matter of time. After that afternoon, I didn't yell. I didn't demand justice. I just left. I got back to my apartment, dropped my backpack on the floor, and sank into the couch. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have a mental checklist of my parents' house tasks. I didn't need to check the mortgage due date. Didn't need to wonder if Emily had forgotten to pay the internet bill. That silence wasn't unfamiliar. It was new. And whether it felt strange or not, it was mine. It was right there on that couch, with my body tired and my mind finally quiet, that I made the decision. I wasn't going to pay another dime. I wasn't going to fix another thing. I wasn't going to keep pretending any of it was mutual. I was done. For real this time. Because if I didn't stop right then, maybe I never would. That following Monday, I called the bank and had my name removed from the joint account used for the house payments. Then I logged into the utilities websites, electric, water, gas, and canceled every single auto payment linked to my card. Over 5 years of quiet charges, taken on without a word, like my bank account was just an extension of the family's emotional collapse. I turned off the bill reminders on my phone, one by one. Every canceled alert felt like shedding a layer off my back, like I was finally giving my life the space it never had. Deleting those reminders was more than just practical. It felt like a ritual, like I was clearing my calendar of the leftovers from a life that had never truly been mine. It felt weird to have days that didn't start with overdue notices. Weird and freeing. That same night, I stopped by the store and bought a dark German beer, one I'd always been curious about but never picked up because it felt unnecessary. I got home, let it chill, sat out on the balcony, and drank it slowly, alone. Not to toast the breakup, but to mark the start of a peace I didn't even know was possible. In the days that followed, I started sleeping better, woke up without that pit in my stomach. No messages begging for help disguised as emergencies. I went back to running on Sundays. Started reading for pleasure again. Nothing technical, just literature, philosophy, essays I'd always put off. It felt strange to have time to think about myself, but it also felt like breathing after years of not knowing you were suffocating. I picked up that advanced software architecture course I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. Now I did. Not because the world got lighter, but because I stopped carrying what was never mine to begin with. I didn't announce anything. I just let it be. But for the first time, I started living like someone who didn't owe anyone anything, and deep down, I knew their silence wouldn't last. And when it came back, it wouldn't sound like an apology. It'd sound like another request. In the first few days, my family's silence almost felt like a sign of respect, as if, for a moment, they had understood what I'd never needed to say out loud. But I knew that kind of silence, coming from them, was never peace. It was just the pause before the next demand. By the third week, I got a message from my dad. "Michael, the mortgage is due Friday. Can you send the transfer today?" No mention of the will. Not even, "How are you?" It was like that Saturday, the day I found out I'd been written out. I replied straight, no sugarcoating. "Ask Emily. The house is hers, right?" Minutes later, another notification popped up. My mom. "Son, don't do this. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, read it, took a breath, and deleted it. For the first time, my silence wasn't a scream on the inside. It was a shield. I didn't need to explain my absence anymore. It had been justified for years. It took a few more days, but Emily eventually texted too. "You're being really extreme. They only did it because they trust you'll be okay. I'm not you." I read that sentence a few times. The subtext was clear. "You're strong. I'm not." I replied calmly. "Then show you deserve what you got. Start by paying the mortgage." She saw it, never replied. The following week, I got an automatic transfer request, $2,900, no warning, no context. Sender, Denise Reed. I declined without hesitation. Minutes later, the phone rang. I ignored it. Another call, ignored again. Then came the message, "Michael, I know you saw it. Why did you decline?" My answer was short, cold, and final, because it's not my responsibility anymore. Ask your heir. 2 days later, the cracks started showing. An old college friend who still followed my mom on social media sent me a screenshot. It was a post with a generic picture of flowers and the caption, "It's heartbreaking when children turn their backs on you, even after everything you've done for them." Comments from church friends, old acquaintances, all offering comfort. No direct mention of me, but it was obvious who it was about. I ignored it, but it put me on alert, and what came next confirmed what I already suspected. A second cousin from Spokane, someone I hadn't talked to in months, called out of the blue. After the usual small talk, she cut to the chase. "Look, I'm sorry to bring this up, but your mom talked to Aunt Anne, and there's something weird going around. She mentioned the bank is reviewing some old account activity and that you had access to the joint account. Now they're saying some numbers aren't adding up. Do you know anything about that?" I froze, not out of fear, but because in that moment, everything became crystal clear. It wasn't enough to cut me out of the will. It wasn't enough to watch me walk away. Now, they needed to explain the chaos that followed my absence. And the most convenient way was simple. turn the son who kept everything afloat into the one responsible for the collapse. My cousin didn't accuse me, didn't hint at anything. She just passed the message along in that thought you should know tone. And she was right. I needed to know. Because this wasn't just a lie. It was an attack on the one thing I'd always protected. My name. They didn't have to say it out loud. They didn't need to. All it took was planting the right doubt in front of the right people. All it took was dropping just enough dirt, gently enough, to make it look like concern, not slander. And it wasn't the gossip that hurt. It was realizing that after everything I did for them, the only thing left was the attempt to rewrite me as the villain. As someone who, after carrying it all, could still be accused of stealing, as if the years of breaking myself just to hold it all together had never happened. And it was there, on that day, hearing my cousin repeat those words like she was passing along a question, that I understood. My honor had been thrown on the table. Still, despite how much it rattled me at first, I chose to ignore it, to not play their game. I thought rumors and whispers had no place in my new life. And that was my mistake. The post started like shadows, a Bible verse about betrayal shared by my mom. An image of an empty house with the caption, "Some children only find their way back when the roof caves in." Emily reposted it, adding, "When justice doesn't come from family, sometimes it shows up in other ways." I read that one 3 times silently. None of them said my name, but every single one made it clear who they were aimed at. Over time, the comments stopped being from just familiar faces. Strangers I'd never met started chiming in, writing things like, "Take legal action, Mrs. Reed. A son like that needs to be held accountable." Others asked if the house was in litigation, if she needed help finding a lawyer. Some guy claiming to be a distant relative commented that it was time to report financial and emotional neglect. I was being condemned by a virtual jury before I'd even had a chance to speak. Then came the private messages. One of my mom's church friends wrote, "I hope this isn't true, but if it is, Michael, how could you?" Even a former professor emailed me, short and cold, "I'm disappointed." No one asked me anything. No one cared to hear my side. The crying victim's version always seems more believable than the silent man's. I started seeing the ripple effect beyond the screen. One morning at the grocery store, 2 neighborhood ladies looked at me like I was on trial, whispered, turned away. At a co-working space I used to frequent, someone I knew avoided eye contact as I walked by. The judgment had left the internet and followed me into the most mundane corners of life. And what hurt the most was the silence. No questions, just condemnation. I didn't respond, not then, but something inside me was starting to boil. It wasn't anger, it was something older, deeper. The kind of pain only felt by someone who's carried a lifetime of invisible sacrifice and suddenly sees it all twisted into an accusation. I could live with being cut out of the will. I could endure the indifference, but watching my integrity shredded in public by people feeding on half-truths, that I couldn't take. I opened my files, started organizing the documents I'd kept more out of habit than need. Bank statements showing the mortgage payments month after month. Utility bills, electric, water, gas, maintenance, all paid from my card. Medical invoices from when my dad fell ill last November. A screenshot of the will, date crystal clear, 2.5 years ago. Emily, sole beneficiary. On top of that, the messages from my mom, weeks after cutting me out, still asking for money. Everything lined up, no commentary, just facts. I could have let it go, let time handle the mess, but even silence has its limits. When a man's honor is put in question publicly, silence stops being a virtue and becomes complicity. And I wasn't going to be complicit, not this time. I opened Facebook, wrote a post, clear, calm, no dramatics, no yelling, just explaining what was happening. Said I'd seen the posts, the comments, the judgments. Said I'd always preferred to handle things quietly, but now the facts were being twisted maliciously, and that I had to show the truth. I attached the documents, one by one, receipts, screenshots, statements, the will. Each image spoke for itself. Each piece of data told the real story. I ended with a straightforward paragraph. I've been called ungrateful, absent. Some even suggested I took what wasn't mine. The truth is simple. For years, I paid everything to keep up a house that was no longer mine. I was formally excluded and still expected to carry on like nothing changed. I never spoke about it because I didn't think I had to. But when your honor is questioned in public, you have 2 options: hide or defend yourself. I chose to defend myself. I hit post, closed my laptop. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel revenge. I felt solid, because what I needed wasn't anyone else's justice, it was my own peace. And peace, to me, is knowing I didn't let any lie take the place of the truth. I had done what needed to be done, but I had no idea what was coming next. The morning after I posted, there was no immediate public reaction from my mom, Emily, or my dad, just silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't the kind that comes right before a demand. It was the silence of people standing in front of a mirror, too proud to decide whether to face it or turn away. As the day went on, the messages started rolling in. Some were short, "Now I get it." Others more direct, "I'm sorry, I really believed what your mom posted." An aunt who never got involved sent me a hesitant voice message, "Michael, it's shocking to see it all laid out like that." I feel awful. I didn't reply to anyone, not out of indifference, but because the truth, when clearly presented, speaks for itself. Over the next 3 days, my name started disappearing from my parents' socials. Old posts were deleted. Comments turned off. The victim posts vanished without a word, like they'd never existed. My dad's profile was deactivated. Emily kept hers but changed her profile picture to a black and white flower, the same one she used whenever she wanted the world to see her as fragile and wronged. A coworker mentioned, almost conspiratorially, "I saw your post. You handled it with so much dignity. I wouldn't have had half your patience." I just nodded in thanks. There was nothing left to say. The facts were finally where they should have been all along, out in the open. The following week, I got a call from a landline. I didn't answer. It happened again 2 days later. The voicemail was short. My mom. "If you want to talk, there's still time." I didn't respond, because it wasn't about time anymore. It was about truth. And truth, in that house, had an expiration date. I went to the grocery store on a random Saturday. For the first time in weeks, no one avoided eye contact, no whispers. At the co-working space, the looks were neutral again, cordial, even relieved. Like now that the truth was out, the shame didn't belong to me anymore. I was no longer the ungrateful son. I was the man who stood tall when everyone expected him to fold. Not everyone came around. Some acquaintances close to my parents still carried a reserved, quiet judgment in their eyes, like they were silently saying that no matter the proof, they'd already picked a side, and that was fine. Not everyone wants to see. Not everyone has to. 2 weeks later, I got a message from Lorraine, a cousin from the countryside I talked to maybe once a year. She'd seen a listing, my parents' house. "Looks like they're trying to sell fast, lowered the price. Must be in trouble." I read it calmly, not coldly, just detached, like someone watching a fire they didn't start and weren't going to put out. Strangers started sharing my post. Some wrote, "Always hear every side of the story." Others, "Family isn't always who loves you back." They didn't tag me. They weren't looking for a response. But for the first time, I saw my truth finding a voice in people I'd never met, and none of them needed to know me to recognize what was fair. I started sleeping better again, went back to revising my travel plans, picked up an old remote consulting project with a firm in Colorado, and for the first time in years, I was making plans without adjusting them around my parents. My money didn't have a mandatory destination anymore. My calendar didn't revolve around crises that weren't mine. Before, every decision I made had to pass through an invisible filter. What if they need me again? Can I say no if they ask for help? Now, that hesitation was gone. My days were mine. For the first time, I had permission, not from anyone else, but from myself, to live. Emily made one last attempt, a long message full of commas and justifications. "You were always the strong one, Michael. I just wanted you to understand our side." "For the first time," I replied. No anger, no sarcasm. I wrote, "Maybe it's time you learned to stand on your own. Stop hiding behind our parents' emotional safety net. That doesn't help you grow. It just keeps you stuck." And that was it. Because the rest, she'd have to figure out on her own. By the 4th week, the house showed up on another real estate site. The listing mentioned urgent need to sell and owner in delicate situation. I read it like someone reading a notice of departure. They were exiting the stage they forced me to hold up. And now that they had nowhere left to hide, they wanted to slip out quietly through the back door. I didn't celebrate. I didn't wish them harm. But I also didn't offer any more rescue. They made their choices, and now they lived with them, just like we all do. The difference this time was, I was whole. And it was only then, days later, that I realized what had truly changed. I wasn't waiting for recognition anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I was worthy of respect. I had stopped fighting for space in a house that only ever wanted me as its foundation. And more important than all that, I had chosen to grow far away from that ground. And even if I never go back, I know not everything there has fallen yet. Maybe the house still stands, maybe it doesn't. But what matters is, for the first time, the one who didn't fall was me. And that alone is victory enough. I never wanted to cut ties. I just wanted them to be real. But when I realized the only thing tying me to that house was my usefulness, I had to leave. And when your name becomes currency in other people's gossip, you have two choices: stand up and speak, or silently sign off on your own erasure. I chose to speak, with proof, with clarity, with boundaries, and after that, I chose silence again. Now, I want to hear from you. You don't have to tell me everything, just think with me. How many times have you swallowed your pain just to keep the peace? How often have you accepted less than you deserve just to avoid letting someone down? Do you know anyone who's been through something like this? Someone cut out by their own family, not for failing, but for no longer being useful? And if it were you in my place, what would you have done? Share with me in the comments. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not the only ones who've been through this. And maybe, just maybe, your story can help someone else stand back up, because at the end of the day, there's something worth more than any inheritance. The freedom to stop folding yourself in half just to fit into a place that was never meant for you.